What happens when grief speaks louder than reason? Shirley Hopper, drowning in loss after burying her younger sister, stands in a room full of strangers and utters 3 words that will change everything. Make me pregnant. The man who hears her, Thomas Hill, a widower haunted by his own tragedy, refuses to take advantage of her pain. But weeks later, when those same words are spoken sober, intentional, and raw, a single night of vulnerability creates an impossible consequence. Now, with a pregnancy that shouldn't exist, public scandal tearing them apart, and their own fears threatening to destroy what fragile hope remains, Shirley and Thomas must decide, can something beautiful grow from the wreckage of 2 broken lives? This is a story about consent, grief, and the courage to begin again. If you're ready for a romance that will wreck you and rebuild you, hit that subscribe button and let's dive in. Make me pregnant. The words left Shirley Hopper's mouth before her brain could stop them, cutting through the elegant chatter of the Dallas charity gala like a knife through silk. The champagne glass in her hand tilted dangerously, golden liquid sloshing against crystal as 3 nearby conversations died mid-sentence. The man standing in front of her went absolutely still. Thomas Hill was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark blonde hair silvering at the temples and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore his tuxedo-like armor, shoulders straight, expression controlled, but something shifted behind those eyes when her words registered. Not shock, exactly. Something deeper. Something that looked almost like recognition. Excuse me? His voice was low, careful, the kind of voice that knew how to navigate landmines. Shirley's heart hammered against her ribs. Alcohol and grief and 3 days of holding herself together finally cracking wide open. Around them, the ballroom glittered with wealth and privilege, chandeliers casting golden light on Dallas's elite as they celebrated family legacies and future generations. Everything she didn't have. Everything her sister would never have. You heard me, she said, louder this time, reckless with pain she couldn't contain anymore. A woman in diamonds 2 feet away gasped softly. A man in an expensive suit raised his eyebrows, already pulling out his phone. Thomas took 1 step closer, not touching her but creating a barrier between Shirley and the growing audience. His jaw was tight, but his eyes never left her face. You're drunk, he said quietly. I'm also serious. Shirley's voice cracked on the last word. She hated how it sounded. Desperate. Broken. Everything she'd sworn she'd never let herself be. No. Thomas's tone was firm but somehow gentle. You're not. You're grieving, and you've had too much to drink, and whatever you think you're asking for right now, this isn't the way to ask for it. The kindness in his refusal was worse than mockery would have been. Shirley felt tears burning behind her eyes, felt the room spinning, felt every single person staring at her like she was a spectacle. The drunk black woman making a scene. The stereotype she'd spent 35 years proving wrong, shattered in 3 words. What would you know about what I need? The words came out sharp, defensive. Nothing, Thomas admitted. But I know enough not to pretend I do when you can barely stand up straight. The room tilted suddenly, and Shirley's knees buckled. Thomas's hand shot out, catching her elbow before she could fall, his grip steady but not possessive. He didn't pull her close, didn't take advantage of her instability. He just held her upright with the careful distance of someone who understood boundaries even when she just demolished her own. Let me get you a car, he said. I don't need your charity. Shirley tried to pull away, but her body wasn't cooperating. It's not charity. It's basic human decency. Thomas glanced at someone over her shoulder and nodded once. Within seconds, a valet appeared at his elbow. I need a car for Ms. Hopper. Now, please. How do you know my name? Shirley asked, the question floating through the alcohol haze. You're wearing a name tag, Thomas said simply. And I saw you earlier, before you started drinking like you were trying to drown something. The observation was too accurate. Shirley had been fine when she arrived 3 hours ago. Professional. Composed. Then someone had made a toast to family and legacy and the next generation, and suddenly she was back in that cemetery in Houston, watching them lower her baby sister into the ground. Watching her mother stand silent and frozen, grief turning her into something cold and unreachable. Hearing the preacher talk about God's plan while all Shirley could think was that if there was a plan, it was cruel and meaningless. Her sister had been 32. Desperate for a child she'd never have. Full of dreams that died with her. The thought sent another wave of nausea through Shirley's stomach. Thomas guided her through the crowd, his hand still on her elbow, his body somehow creating space in the press of people. Shirley could feel their stares burning into her back. Could imagine the whispers already starting. The judgments forming. All the progress she'd made as one of the few black journalists at her firm, all the respect she'd earned through years of careful professionalism, reduced to this single moment of weakness. The Dallas night air hit her face like cold water when they stepped outside. The valet stand was busy, luxury cars gliding up one after another, disgorging passengers in designer clothes and borrowed diamonds. "This will take you home," Thomas said as a black town car pulled up to the curb. He opened the door himself, one hand still steadying her. "The driver knows to wait until you're safely inside." Shirley looked up at him, this stranger who just refused her desperate request with more gentleness than she'd known she needed. In the streetlight, his face was all sharp angles and shadows, but his eyes were softer than his voice. "Why are you being nice to me?" she asked. Something painful flickered across his expression. "Because someone was kind to me once, when I said things I didn't mean. When grief was making decisions my brain wasn't equipped to handle. I meant it," Shirley whispered. "Maybe you did. Maybe you didn't. Either way, not like this." Thomas stepped back, letting her go. "And not with me." He closed the car door before she could respond, and the driver pulled away from the curb. Shirley watched through the back window as Thomas Hill stood on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, watching her leave. There was something lonely in the way he stood there. Something that understood exactly what she was carrying. The car ride home was a blur. Her apartment was dark and empty and full of boxes she hadn't unpacked since moving back to Dallas 2 weeks ago. The bed was unmade. The kitchen sink full of dishes. Evidence of a life barely being lived. Shirley made it to the bathroom before she threw up. When she finally crawled into bed at 3 in the morning, mascara smeared across her face and shame sitting heavy in her chest, her last coherent thought was that she just humiliated herself in front of Dallas's wealthiest donors and there was no coming back from it. She was wrong about that. But she wouldn't know it for another week. The hangover hit like a freight train at 7 a.m. Shirley's phone was buzzing somewhere under the covers, the sound drilling into her skull like a pickaxe. She fumbled for it, squinting at the screen through eyes that felt full of sand. 12 missed calls from her mother. 23 text messages from coworkers. 6 emails from her editor. Her stomach dropped. She opened the texts first. The top one was from Marcus, a photographer she sometimes worked with, just 2 words and a link. "Girl, WTF?" The link opened to a Dallas Society blog. The headline made Shirley's blood run cold. "Charity Gala Scandal. Mystery Woman Propositions Thomas Hill." There was a photo. Grainy, taken from across the room, but clear enough. Shirley, glass in hand, standing too close to Thomas Hill. The caption underneath read, "Sources say the unidentified woman made explicit requests before being escorted out by the billionaire philanthropist. Hill's representatives declined to comment." Shirley read the article 3 times, each pass making her feel sicker. They didn't have her name yet, but it was only a matter of time. Dallas society circles were small. Someone would talk. Someone would connect the dots. Her phone rang. Her mother. Shirley almost didn't answer. Almost let it go to voicemail like she had the previous 12 calls. But guilt and grief and the desperate hope that maybe her mother would somehow make this better made her thumb hit the green button. Shirley Marie Hopper, what on earth have you done? Not hello. Not, are you okay? Just immediate judgment, cold and sharp as always. Mama, I can explain. Explain what? Explain how you embarrass yourself and this family at some party. Explain how you're in the gossip pages making a fool of yourself? Her mother's voice was tight, controlled, the way it had been at the funeral. The way it had been for weeks. Grief had turned Patricia Hopper into ice, and nothing surely did seem to thaw her. I was drunk. I was hurting. I wasn't thinking straight. Your sister is barely in the ground, and you're out drinking and propositioning strange men? What is wrong with you? The words hit like a slap. Shirley closed her eyes, phone pressed to her ear, trying to find something to say that wouldn't make this worse. Nothing's wrong with me, Mama. I'm grieving. Same as you. Well, you have a funny way of showing it. Her mother's voice cracked slightly, the first sign of emotion breaking through. She wanted a baby so badly, Shirley. She wanted to be a mother, and she never got the chance, and here you are throwing yourself at men like some kind of... Don't, Shirley said sharply. Don't finish that sentence. Silence on the other end. Heavy and loaded. I have to go, her mother finally said. I can't talk about this right now. The line went dead. Shirley sat in bed staring at her phone, shame and anger and grief all tangled together in her chest until she couldn't tell which was which. Her sister had wanted a baby. Had tried for years with her husband before the cancer diagnosis. Had died believing she'd failed at the one thing she wanted most. And Shirley, drunk and broken, had asked a stranger to give her what her sister never got. The shame of it was suffocating. She called in sick to work. Ignored the messages piling up. Spent the day in bed with the curtains drawn, trying to disappear into sleep and failing. It was dark outside when her doorbell rang. Shirley ignored it. Whoever it was could leave. She wasn't fit for human interaction. The doorbell rang again. Then a third time, insistent. Go away, Shirley called from the bedroom, not moving. Ms. Hopper, I need to speak with you. The voice was male, unfamiliar, speaking through the door. I'm with the Dallas Morning Tribune. I have some questions about the incident at the charity gala. Shirley's blood went cold. A reporter. At her door. She stayed silent, barely breathing, praying he'd leave. I just need a comment. The voice continued. About your relationship with Thomas Hill. About the nature of your request. My sources say... Shirley's phone rang, cutting him off. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her thumb hit accept. Don't open the door. Thomas Hill's voice was calm, quiet, absolutely certain. And don't say anything to him. How did you? I have people who keep track of things like reporters showing up at doors. He'll leave in about 30 seconds. His editor already called off the story. Why would they do that? Because I asked them to. And because I made a donation large enough that they remembered they value my goodwill more than they value gossip. Shirley should have felt grateful. Instead, she felt something close to anger. I don't need you to rescue me. I'm not rescuing you. I'm cleaning up a mess I'm partially responsible for. You didn't do anything wrong. I'm the one who made a request while intoxicated that I refused. Thomas interrupted. And now you're being punished for it while I'm being treated like some kind of gentleman. The double standard is appalling, and I'm not going to contribute to it. Outside, Shirley heard footsteps retreating down the hallway. The reporter was leaving. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me yet. We need to talk. But not on the phone, and not with you still recovering from last night. He paused. Are you free Thursday afternoon? Why Thursday? Because that's when I'm scheduled to do an interview with your publication. Human interest piece about my late wife's foundation. I believe you're the one assigned to it. Shirley's stomach dropped. She'd forgotten about that assignment. Her editor had given it to her 2 weeks ago, before her sister died, before everything fell apart. I can ask someone else to take it, she said. Don't. Thomas's voice was firm. I'd prefer to speak with you. 2 o'clock at my office. We'll do the interview, and then we'll talk about what happened at the gala. Like adults. Sober ones. He hung up before she could argue. Shirley sat in the dark, phone in hand, trying to process what had just happened. Thomas Hill had stopped a news story about her. Had protected her reputation when he had every right to let her suffer the consequences of her own actions. Had scheduled a meeting like nothing strange had happened between them at all. She didn't know if she wanted to thank him or never see him again. Thursday came too quickly. Shirley stood outside the Hill Industries building at 158, straightening her blazer for the 3rd time and trying to calm the nervous energy vibrating through her chest. She'd done 100 interviews in her career. This shouldn't feel different. But it did. The lobby was all glass and steel and modern art that probably cost more than Shirley's annual salary. The receptionist smiled professionally and directed her to the 14th floor, where Thomas's assistant, a polished woman in her 50s, offered coffee and led her to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Dallas. Thomas stood when she entered. He was dressed more casually than at the gala, gray slacks and a white button-down with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, but he still carried himself with that careful control she remembered. Ms. Hopper, he said, extending his hand. Thank you for coming. His handshake was firm, professional, and lasted exactly the appropriate amount of time. Nothing in his demeanor suggested they'd ever had any interaction beyond this professional interview. Shirley followed his lead, settling into the chair across from his desk and pulling out her recorder and notepad. Thank you for making time. I know your schedule must be busy. Not too busy to talk about Elizabeth's legacy. Something softened in his expression when he said the name. That's always worth making time for. For the next 40 minutes, they conducted a perfectly professional interview. Thomas talked about his late wife, about the foundation they'd started together to fund research into pregnancy complications, about how she died 8 years ago when a routine pregnancy turned catastrophic, about how he'd poured his grief into making sure other women might have better outcomes. Shirley took notes, asked follow-up questions, maintained the careful distance of a journalist doing her job. But underneath the professionalism, she was acutely aware of the tension in the room. The unspoken conversation waiting to happen. When she finally turned off her recorder and closed her notebook, the silence felt heavy. That should give me what I need for the article, Shirley said, standing. Thank you for your time, Mr. Hill. Sit down, Shirley. Thomas's voice was gentle but left no room for argument. Please. We're not done. She sat, hard hammering. Thomas leaned back in his chair, studying her with those storm-cloud eyes. How are you doing? Really? The question caught her off guard. I'm fine. You're a terrible liar. I'm managing, Shirley amended. Your sister died 3 weeks ago. You're not managing. You're surviving. There's a difference. He paused. I know because I spent 2 years pretending I was managing after Elizabeth died. Fooled a lot of people. Didn't fool myself. Shirley's throat tightened. Why are you being so kind to me? After what I said to you, after the scene I made, you should want nothing to do with me. Should I? Thomas tilted his head slightly. You were drowning, and you asked someone to throw you a life preserver. You just asked in the wrong way. That doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. I reduced myself to a stereotype, Shirley said, the shame she'd been carrying for days spilling out. Drunk black woman throwing herself at a rich white man. Do you have any idea how that looks? How that feeds into every racist narrative about women like me? I imagine it looks exactly how you think it looks, and I'm sorry for that. Thomas's expression was serious. But the people judging you for having a moment of weakness while grieving are the problem, not you. And for what it's worth, I didn't see a stereotype that night. I saw someone in pain asking if life could still mean something. The words hit something deep in Shirley's chest. She looked away, blinking against sudden tears. My sister wanted a baby so badly, she whispered. She tried for 3 years before the cancer diagnosis. When she knew she was dying, all she could talk about was how she'd failed. How she'd never be a mother. How her life didn't matter because she didn't leave anything behind. And you wanted to prove her wrong, Thomas said quietly. You wanted to create something. To prove that life still has meaning even when it takes everything from us. Shirley nodded, not trusting her voice. I understand that impulse more than you know. Thomas stood, moving to the window, hands in his pockets. Elizabeth was 4 months pregnant when she died. We tried for 5 years. That pregnancy was supposed to be impossible. And then it happened, and we thought maybe we'd beaten the odds. Maybe we'd get our miracle. His voice was steady, but Shirley could hear the weight of old grief underneath. The complications started at 20 weeks. By 22 weeks, we knew we were losing them both. She made me promise I'd never try again. Never risk loving anyone enough to lose them like that. Never put another woman through what she went through. Shirley's heart cracked. I'm so sorry. So am I. Thomas turned back to face her. But here's what I've learned in 8 years. Grief makes us say things we don't mean and ask for things we don't really want. What you asked me for at that gala? You didn't want me. You wanted hope. You wanted proof that creation is still possible even when death feels like all that's left. Maybe, Shirley admitted. But I also meant it. Part of me did. The part that's terrified I'll end up like my sister, full of dreams that never come true. Then say it again when you're sober, Thomas said simply. Not to me necessarily. But to yourself? Figure out what you really want. Not as an escape from grief, but as a choice made from a place of clarity. And if you still want it, find a way to make it happen that honors you instead of diminishing you. The words settled into Shirley like seeds finding soil. Thank you, she said after a long moment. For not taking advantage of me that night. For protecting me from the fallout. For this conversation. You don't need to thank me for basic decency. Thomas returned to his desk, pulling out a business card and writing something on the back. This is my personal number. If you need anything, call. No strings, no expectations. Just one person who understands grief offering support to another. Shirley took the card, their fingers brushing briefly. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her system. She left his office with more questions than answers, but somehow feeling lighter than she had in weeks. 3 days later, Shirley knocked on Thomas Hill's door at 9 p.m., stone-cold sober and terrified. He answered in jeans and a t-shirt, surprise flickering across his face before settling into something more cautious. Shirley? Make me pregnant. The words came out quieter this time, steadier, but no less serious. Thomas didn't move. Are you drunk? No. I'm sober. Completely sober. And I've thought about nothing else for 3 days. He studied her face for a long moment, then stepped back from the door. Come inside. We're not having this conversation in the hallway. His house was surprisingly normal. Comfortable furniture, lived-in spaces, photos on the mantel of a woman with kind eyes who must have been Elizabeth. Shirley sat on the couch, hands clasped in her lap, while Thomas settled into a chair across from her. "Talk to me," he said. "Tell me what you're really asking for." Shirley took a deep breath. "I'm 35 years old. I'm not in a relationship and haven't been in years. My career is demanding, and I'm good at it, but it's not enough. My sister died believing her life didn't matter because she never became a mother, and I can't stop thinking about whether mine will matter either." "Your life matters regardless of whether you have children," Thomas said gently. "I know that intellectually. But emotionally? I want to create something. I want to prove that hope still exists. And I don't want to wait for some perfect situation that might never come. I want to choose this. Deliberately. With someone who understands what I'm asking for and why. Why me? Because you refused me when I was vulnerable. Because you understand grief. Because you don't want forever any more than I do, but you understand the weight of choosing to create life anyway." Shirley met his eyes. "I'm not asking you to be a father or a husband or anything beyond what you're willing to give. I'm asking you to help me do something intentional instead of accidental. Something that comes from choice, not desperation." Thomas was quiet for a long time, his expression unreadable. "This is insane," he finally said. "I know. If you get pregnant, everything changes. Your body, your life, your future. You can't undo it. I know. People will judge you. They'll say terrible things. The racial dynamics alone." "I know," Shirley said again, firmer this time. "I've thought about all of it. And I'm still here. Still asking." Thomas stood, pacing to the window. "I can't have children, Shirley. Elizabeth and I tried for 5 years. After she died, I had tests done. The doctors said natural conception was effectively impossible for me. So even if I agreed to this, the chances of it working are virtually zero. Then we try, and if it doesn't work, at least I chose to try. At least I didn't let fear stop me from wanting something." He turned to face her, and the expression on his face was so raw it hurt to look at. "What if it does work? What if you get pregnant, and everything I've been afraid of for 8 years becomes real again? Then we deal with it," Shirley said quietly. "Together or separately, whatever feels right. But we don't let fear make our choices for us." The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility and terror. "If we do this," Thomas said slowly, "it's not just one night. It's a decision we make consciously, soberly, with full understanding of what we're risking. I understand. And if you change your mind at any point, you walk away. No guilt, no pressure, no questions. Same for you." Thomas crossed the room, sitting down on the couch beside her, close but not touching. "I haven't touched anyone since Elizabeth died. Haven't wanted to. The thought of it has felt like betrayal." "Then maybe this isn't right for you," Shirley said, even though the words hurt to say. "I didn't say that." He reached out slowly, taking her hand. His palm was warm, calloused, careful. "I said I haven't wanted to. But sitting here with you, listening to you choose hope even when hope is terrifying, I think maybe I want to try." Shirley's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "So what do we do?" "We talk," Thomas said. "We make sure this is what we both really want. And if it is, we take our time. We do this right." They talked until midnight. About logistics and boundaries and what-ifs. About hopes and fears and the possibility of failure. About what it meant to choose creation in the middle of grief. And when Shirley finally left at 1 a.m., they'd made a plan. Not for that night, but for the following weekend. Time to think, time to be sure, time to let the decision settle into something more than impulse. The week passed in a blur of nervous anticipation and second-guessing. Shirley told no one. Worked her regular assignments. Had dinner with her mother, who was still distant but slightly warmer than before. Tried not to think about what she was planning and failed completely. Saturday arrived clear and cold. Shirley drove to Thomas's house at 7 p.m., hands shaking slightly on the steering wheel. He met her at the door, and the tension was immediate and electric. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Are you?" I asked first. "Yes," Shirley said. "I'm sure." "Are you?" Thomas nodded slowly. "More sure than I've been about anything in years. Also more terrified." "Same." He stepped back, letting her in. The house was warm, soft music playing from somewhere, wine glasses on the coffee table. "I wasn't sure if you'd want wine," Thomas said. "Given everything, one glass won't hurt." They sat on the couch, drinks in hand, the weight of what they were about to do hanging between them. "Tell me about your sister," Thomas said. "What was she like?" The request surprised Shirley, but she found herself talking. About Maya's laugh, about her stubbornness, about the way she'd fought so hard for every dream and lost them all anyway. About how unfair it felt that someone who wanted life so badly had been robbed of it. Thomas listened, really listened, and shared his own stories about Elizabeth. About their early days together, about her fierce determination to make the foundation work even when she was sick, about the promises they'd made to each other. The conversation shifted to lighter things. Childhood memories. Favorite books. Places they'd traveled. The tension eased into something warmer, more intimate without being sexual. When Thomas finally reached for her hand, it felt natural. When he kissed her, it felt like the continuation of a conversation they'd been having all night. They moved to his bedroom slowly, taking their time, talking through each step. There was no performance, no pretense. Just two people choosing to be vulnerable together, to create something intentional out of shared grief and fragile hope. The night was tender and careful and nothing like Shirley had imagined. They talked as much as they touched, paused when emotions got overwhelming, held each other when words failed. When it was over, they lay in the darkness, not quite sure what to say. "That was," Shirley started then stopped. "Yeah," Thomas agreed quietly. "Do you regret it?" "No." "You?" "No." Shirley turned to face him. "But I'm scared." "So am I." They fell asleep like that, facing each other in the dark, two people who just made a choice neither fully understood the consequences of yet. Morning came too quickly. Thomas made coffee while Shirley borrowed his shower. They moved around each other carefully, aware that something had shifted but not sure what it meant. "What happens now?" Shirley asked as she prepared to leave. "Now we wait," Thomas said. "We see what happens. And we try not to panic in the meantime. And if nothing happens, then at least we chose to try." Shirley nodded, gathering her things. At the door, she turned back. "Thank you for taking me seriously. For not treating this like a joke or a mistake. Thank you for trusting me," Thomas replied. She left before either of them could say anything else. For weeks passed. Shirley threw herself into work, tried not to think about possibilities, and failed miserably. Her period was late, but that didn't mean anything. Stress could do that. Grief could do that. She bought a pregnancy test on a Tuesday morning and left it in the bathroom drawer for 3 days before she could work up the courage to use it. Thursday evening, she finally took it. 2 lines appeared almost immediately. Shirley sat on the bathroom floor, test and shaking hands, and started to laugh. Then cry. Then both at once. She called Thomas from the bathroom floor. "It's positive," she said when he answered. "The test is positive." Silence on the other end. Then, "That's impossible." "Apparently not." More silence. Shirley could hear him breathing, could imagine him processing the information that should have been impossible. "How do you feel?" he finally asked. "Terrified." amazed. Like I might throw up. That's fair. His voice was shaky. I think I might throw up too. What do we do? You make a doctor's appointment, Thomas said. You make sure it's real. And then we figure out the rest. Okay. Okay. Either of them hung up. Thomas? Yeah? Are you freaking out? A long pause. Completely. Me too. Good. That makes two of us. They stayed on the phone for another hour, talking through panic and possibility, either ready to face the reality alone. The doctor's appointment confirmed it 2 days later. 6 weeks pregnant. Healthy vitals. Routine ultrasound scheduled for week 8. Shirley walked out of the clinic in a daze and called Thomas from the parking lot. It's real, she said. Yeah, he replied, voice thick. It's real. That's when everything started to fall apart. If you loved this intense beginning and want to see how Shirley and Thomas navigate the impossible, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Drop a comment telling me if you think Thomas should claim the baby publicly or protect Shirley from the spotlight. And smash that like button to support more emotionally complex stories like this one. Part 2 drops soon, and trust me, you don't want to miss what happens when the world finds out about this pregnancy. Thomas's panic started 3 days after the doctor's appointment. He called late at night, voice tight. We need to talk about logistics. Logistics? Shirley had been half asleep, but his tone woke her up fast. Medical care. The best specialists. I have connections at. Thomas, I have health insurance. I have a doctor. I'm fine. You don't understand. Elizabeth's pregnancy, the complications started. I'm not Elizabeth, Shirley said gently but firmly. And this pregnancy isn't hers. Silence. Then, I know that. Rationally, I know that. But emotionally? Emotionally, I'm terrified that I just helped create something I'm going to lose again. Shirley's heart ached for him. We don't have to do this together if it's too much. I meant what I said about no obligations. I don't want to run, Thomas said. But I also don't know how to not be terrified. They talked for another hour, working through his fears, establishing boundaries. Thomas would come to doctor's appointments if invited. Would provide whatever support Shirley needed. Would try not to let his past trauma control their present. It worked for about 2 weeks. Then Shirley collapsed at her office. She woke up in the emergency room with an IV in her arm and Thomas sitting in the chair beside her bed, face white. You listed me as your emergency contact, he said when she opened her eyes. I didn't know who else to put. The baby's fine. You're fine. Severe dehydration and low blood sugar. They want to keep you overnight for observation. Shirley closed her eyes, relief flooding through her. Thank you for coming. Where else would I be? That's when his phone started ringing. He glanced at it, frowned, and silenced it. It rang again immediately. You should answer, Shirley said. It's my lawyer. It can wait. But it couldn't wait. Because while Shirley had been unconscious, the hospital had run standard tests, including blood work that confirmed the pregnancy. And someone on staff had recognized Thomas Hill sitting in the ER waiting room. By morning, the story was everywhere. Billionaire Thomas Hill's mystery woman hospitalized. Sources confirm pregnancy. Shirley read the headline on her phone while still in her hospital bed. Nausea that had nothing to do with morning sickness churning her stomach. Thomas was standing at the window, phone pressed to his ear, having what sounded like a tense conversation with someone about damage control and privacy violations. When he hung up, his face was grim. My legal team is handling the hospital leak. But surely it's out there now. People know about the pregnancy. They're going to start digging. Let them dig, Shirley said, trying to sound braver than she felt. We haven't done anything wrong. Haven't we? Thomas turned to face her. I'm 43. You're 35. We barely know each other. This looks exactly like what everyone's going to think it is. A wealthy white man taking advantage of a vulnerable black woman. Is that what you think happened? No. But it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what the story becomes. He was right. Over the next week, the story became a nightmare. Social media exploded. Think pieces appeared about power dynamics and race and predatory wealthy men. Someone dug up the charity gala incident, the blog post about Shirley's drunken proposition. The narrative formed fast and vicious. Desperate woman traps billionaire with pregnancy. Shirley's phone rang constantly. Reporters camped outside her apartment. Her mother called, voice colder than Shirley had ever heard it. Is it true? Patricia Hopper demanded. Are you pregnant by that man from the gala? Yes, Mama, but it's not what they're saying. Then what is it, Shirley? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've lost your mind. Your sister is barely cold in the ground, and you're out here making babies with strangers? The words hit like physical blows. This has nothing to do with Maya. It has everything to do with her. She spent years trying to have a child with her husband, a man she loved, and you just go out and get pregnant by some white man you don't even know. How do you think that makes her memory look? Her memory? Shirley's voice rose. Mama, Maya is dead. She doesn't care what I do. But I'm alive, and I'm trying to find a way to keep living, and if you can't support that, then I don't know what to say to you. I don't know what to say to you either. Her mother's voice cracked. I lost one daughter already. I can't watch you destroy yourself too. The line went dead. Shirley sat in her apartment, curtains drawn against the reporters outside, and cried until she had nothing left. Thomas called that afternoon. I'm coming over. There are reporters everywhere. I don't care. We need to talk. He arrived 30 minutes later, pushing through the crowd of cameras and questions with the kind of authority that came from a lifetime of people getting out of his way. Shirley watched through the peephole as he ignored every shouted question, face set in hard lines. She let him in, and he looked around her small apartment with something like surprise. What? Shirley asked, defensive. Nothing. I just realized I've never been here before. The absurdity of it hit them both. They'd created a life together, but they never shared a meal, never watched a movie, never done any of the normal things people did when building towards something. Thomas sat on her couch, running his hands through his hair. He looked exhausted. My advisors want me to issue a statement. What kind of statement? The kind that distances me from this situation. That suggests we're handling things privately and asks for respect during this difficult time. That's PR speak for I'm not claiming responsibility, Shirley said flatly. Yes. Are you going to do it? Thomas looked at her, and there was something broken in his eyes. I don't know. They're saying if I don't, this becomes a circus. That you'll be hounded even more. That the baby will grow up with this story following them everywhere. And if you do issue the statement, then I'm protecting myself and leaving you to deal with the fallout alone. Shirley sat down beside him, leaving space between them. What do you want to do? I want to go back in time and make different choices. I want Elizabeth to be alive. I want you to have never lost your sister. I want this pregnancy to not feel like I'm betraying everyone I've ever loved. But you can't have any of those things, Shirley said quietly. So what do you want in the reality we're actually living in? Thomas was quiet for a long time. I want to do the right thing. I'm just not sure what that is anymore. Then maybe we start with honesty. We tell the truth. That this was a choice we both made. That it's complicated but it's ours. The truth will make things worse for you. Maybe. But lies will definitely make things worse for me. At least the truth is something I can stand behind. Thomas reached for her hand, the gesture becoming familiar between them. I'm sorry. For all of this. For not thinking through the consequences. For being too afraid to protect you properly. We're both afraid, Shirley said. But we can't let fear make us cruel to each other. They sat like that for a while, hands clasped, two people drowning in consequences either had fully anticipated. The 8-week ultrasound appointment came 3 days later. Thomas picked Shirley up early in the morning, and they drove to the clinic in tense silence. Are you ready for this? Shirley asked as they sat in the waiting room. No. You. Not even a little bit. The ultrasound technician was kind, professional, and carefully neutral when she recognized Thomas. She dimmed the lights, squeezed gel onto Shirley's stomach, and pressed the wand against her skin. The screen flickered to life. There it was. A tiny shape, barely visible, heart flickering like a strobe light. Fast and strong and impossibly real. Shirley stopped breathing. Beside her, Thomas made a sound that might have been a sob or a laugh or both. Everything looks healthy, the technician said. Heart rate is good. Measurements are right on track for 8 weeks. Shirley couldn't look away from the screen. That tiny flickering light was a life. A person who would exist because she'd chosen to create them. Because she'd refused to let fear and grief have the final word. She glanced at Thomas. He was staring at the screen with an expression so raw it hurt to see. Tears were streaming down his face, and he wasn't bothering to wipe them away. That's impossible, he whispered. The doctors said I couldn't. But you did, Shirley said softly. We did. The technician printed pictures, offered congratulations, and left them alone in the dim room. Thomas put his head in his hands and wept. Not quiet tears but deep, wrenching sobs that shook his whole body. Shirley sat up, wrapping her arms around him, holding this man who'd been carrying 8 years of grief and guilt and fear. It's okay, she murmured. You're allowed to feel this. I thought I'd never get this chance again. Thomas managed between sobs. I thought I'd killed it when Elizabeth died. And now it's here. And I'm terrified I'm going to lose it again, and I don't know how to be happy when I'm this scared. Then be both, Shirley said. Be scared and happy. Be grateful and terrified. You don't have to choose. They stayed like that until Thomas could breathe normally again. Until the weight of the moment settled into something they could carry. In the car afterward, Thomas was quiet for a long time. Then, I'm not going to issue that statement. What? The one my advisors want. The distance-creating, responsibility-avoiding statement. I'm not doing it. Thomas, you don't have to. Yes, I do. He pulled over, turning to face her. I'm done being afraid. I'm done letting other people's judgments control my choices. That baby exists because we chose to create them. And I'm going to stand by that choice, publicly, whatever it costs me. It could cost you a lot. I don't care. What costs more is abandoning you to face this alone when we made the decision together. Shirley felt something crack open in her chest. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Thomas called his lawyer from the car and dictated a statement. Short. Honest. Unambiguous. Shirley Hopper and I are expecting a child together. This pregnancy was the result of a mutual decision made by 2 consenting adults. The circumstances of our relationship are private, but my responsibility as this child's father is not. I will not be responding to speculation or judgment about how we chose to build our family. I ask that Ms. Hopper's privacy be respected during this time. The statement went out that afternoon. The response was immediate and divided. Some people praised Thomas for taking responsibility. Others accused him of trying to control the narrative. The racial dynamics dominated think pieces and social media threads. Was this a wealthy white man claiming ownership of a black woman's body and choices? Or was it two people navigating an unconventional situation with honesty? Shirley's phone exploded with messages. Some supportive. Many cruel. Her editor called, voice carefully neutral, asking if she needed time off. "Are you firing me?" Shirley asked bluntly. "No. But I am suggesting you might want to step back from public-facing work until this settles down. This is my career. I'm not giving it up because people are uncomfortable with my personal life. I'm not asking you to give it up. I'm asking you to be realistic about how this affects your credibility as a journalist." The words stung, but Shirley understood. In the journalism world, she'd become the story instead of telling it. That was poison for credibility. She took a leave of absence. Not because she wanted to, but because fighting on too many fronts at once would break her. Thomas's world was imploding too. Business partners expressed concern. Board members called emergency meetings. His late wife's family reached out, hurt and confused, feeling like Elizabeth's memory was being disrespected. He handled each crisis with quiet determination, never backing down from his statement, never suggesting Shirley was anything less than an equal partner in the decision. But the pressure was building. 3 weeks after the statement, Thomas showed up at Shirley's apartment at midnight, looking wrecked. "I can't do this," he said when she opened the door. Shirley's stomach dropped. "Can't do what?" "Any of it. The scrutiny. The judgment. Watching you get torn apart for a choice I was equally responsible for. Watching my business suffer because I refused to throw you under the bus." "So what are you saying?" Thomas leaned against her doorframe, exhausted. "I'm saying I'm in love with you, and I don't know when it happened, and I'm terrified because the last time I loved someone it killed them." The world stopped. "What?" Shirley whispered. "I'm in love with you," Thomas repeated, looking at her like it was a confession and an apology all at once. "The way you choose hope even when everything hurts. The way you refuse to let fear make you small. The way you've handled all of this with more grace than I've managed. I'm in love with you, and I don't know what to do about it." Shirley couldn't breathe. "Thomas, we barely know each other." "I know. Which is why this is insane. But it's also true. You're in love with the idea of me. Of this baby. Of getting a second chance at what you lost." "Maybe," Thomas admitted. "Or maybe I'm in love with the actual you. The one who called me out for being afraid. The one who chose creation over safety. The one who's carrying my child and letting me be terrified without making me feel weak for it." Shirley's eyes filled with tears. "I can't be Elizabeth for you. I don't want you to be Elizabeth. I want you to be you. And I want to figure out if what we started in grief can become something real. What if it can't? Then at least we'll know we tried." Shirley stepped back, letting him in. They sat on her couch, and for the first time since the pregnancy became public, they talked about the future. Not just logistics and damage control, but actual possibilities. What if they tried dating? What if they gave this thing between them a chance to become something more than a transaction? What if they fell in love properly instead of backward? The conversation lasted until dawn. By the time Thomas left, they'd made a decision. They would try. Carefully. Honestly. Without promises they couldn't keep. They would see if two people who'd created life from grief could build love from the wreckage. The next 3 months were the hardest and sweetest of Shirley's life. Thomas courted her like they had all the time in the world. Dinners at quiet restaurants. Walks in parks where reporters couldn't follow. Late-night conversations about books and dreams and fears. He learned that she hated cilantro and loved thunderstorms. She learned that he played piano when he couldn't sleep and had read every Toni Morrison novel twice. They built something real between them. Slowly. Imperfectly. But the outside pressure never stopped. At 16 weeks, Shirley started showing. The scrutiny intensified. Photographers followed her to doctor's appointments. Strangers felt entitled to comment on her body, her choices, her relationship. Her mother still wasn't speaking to her. Thomas's business took hits. 3 board members resigned. A major investor pulled funding, citing moral concerns. At 18 weeks, they found out they were having a girl. Thomas cried in the ultrasound room. Elizabeth wanted a girl. He whispered. "This isn't Elizabeth's baby," Shirley said gently. "This is ours." "I know. But I can't help feeling like she'd be happy. Like maybe she'd forgive me for moving forward." There's nothing to forgive. Love doesn't stop just because someone dies. It makes room for new love. At 20 weeks, complications started. Shirley's blood pressure spiked. The doctor ordered bed rest. Thomas moved into her apartment without asking permission, sleeping on her couch, making sure she ate and rested and didn't try to do too much. "You don't have to take care of me," Shirley protested. "I know I don't have to. I want to." The complications worsened. At 22 weeks, the same milestone where Elizabeth's pregnancy had turned catastrophic, Shirley was hospitalized. Thomas sat beside her bed, holding her hand, looking like he might shatter. "I can't lose you," he said. "I can't lose either of you. You're not going to lose us," Shirley promised, even though she was terrified too. "You don't know that." "No, I don't. But I know we're going to fight. Both of us." The doctor stabilized her, kept her on strict monitoring, warned that early delivery might be necessary. Shirley spent 2 weeks in the hospital. Thomas never left except to shower and change clothes. He read to her, brought her food from home, held her when she cried from fear and frustration. "Why are you still here?" Shirley asked one night. "This is exactly what you were afraid of. You could walk away. No one would blame you." "I would blame me," Thomas said simply. "And I'm done running from things because they're hard." At 24 weeks, Shirley was released with strict orders and weekly monitoring. At 26 weeks, someone leaked medical records to the press. Details of her complications. Private information that should never have been public. Thomas's legal team went to war. Sued everyone involved. Made sure heads rolled. But the damage was done. The world knew how fragile this pregnancy was. How close they were to losing everything. The speculation intensified. Betting pools appeared online about whether the baby would survive. Think pieces debated whether it was irresponsible for them to have pursued pregnancy at all. Shirley stopped reading the news. Stopped looking at social media. Focused entirely on keeping herself and the baby healthy. Thomas became her shield, handling everything external while she handled everything internal. They fell deeper in love through the crisis. Not despite it, but because of it. At 30 weeks, Shirley went into early labor. Thomas drove her to the hospital at 3 a.m., hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, face set in hard lines. "We're going to be okay," Shirley kept saying, as much to herself as to him. "You don't know that." "No. But I believe it anyway." The doctors stopped the labor. Gave Shirley medications to help the baby's lungs develop. Warned that delivery could happen at any moment. Thomas called his lawyer from the hospital room. "I need you to draw up paperwork," he said. "Parental rights. Medical decision-making. Everything. If something happens to Shirley, I need to make sure the baby is protected." "Thomas," Shirley protested weakly from the bed. "No arguments. I'm not taking any chances." They spent the next week in the hospital. Shirley stable but fragile. The baby hanging on. At 32 weeks, Shirley's water broke. Emergency C-section. Rushed preparations. Thomas in scrubs beside her, holding her hand so tight it hurt. "I love you," he said as they wheeled her into surgery. "I should have said it more. I should have said it every day."
"You're saying it now," Shirley replied, tears streaming down her face. "That's enough." The surgery was fast and terrifying. Shirley heard the baby cry before she saw her. A thin, angry wail that was the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. "She's breathing," the doctor said. "She's small, but she's breathing." They held her up briefly. For pounds, 3 ounces of fury and life. Dark hair and skin that was somehow both Shirley and Thomas, a perfect impossible blend. Then they whisked her away to the NICU, and Shirley was left in the operating room, stitched and empty and terrified. Thomas stayed with her through recovery. "She's beautiful," he kept saying. "She's perfect and beautiful, and she's ours. Is she okay? She's fighting, just like her mother." The NICU days were the hardest. Their daughter, whom they'd named Maya Elizabeth after the women they'd lost, spent 6 weeks in an incubator. Breathing tubes, feeding tubes, monitors tracking every heartbeat. Shirley and Thomas lived at the hospital, took turns sitting beside the incubator, talked to their daughter through the plastic, prayed and hoped and refused to give up. The press camped outside, demanded updates, speculated about every movement. Thomas issued one statement: "Our daughter is fighting for her life. That's all that matters. Leave us alone." At 5 weeks old, Maya came off the breathing tube. At 6 weeks, she started bottle feeding. At 7 weeks, the doctors said she could go home. Shirley cried when they put Maya in her car seat. This tiny person who'd fought so hard to exist, who'd defied every odd, who was alive because 2 people had chosen hope over fear. Thomas drove them home at 15 miles per hour, terrified of every bump and turn. Their daughter slept the whole way, unaware of the miracle she was. The first week home was chaos. Sleepless nights, feeding struggles, learning how to parent a premature baby with all her special needs. But underneath the chaos was joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. They were a family. Strange and unconventional and built from grief, but a family nonetheless. 2 weeks after coming home, Thomas found Shirley crying in the nursery at 3 a.m. "What's wrong?" he asked, immediately alert. "Nothing's wrong," Shirley said, looking down at Maya sleeping in her arms. "Everything's right. That's what's so terrifying. I'm happy, Thomas. Genuinely happy. And I keep waiting for it to be taken away." Thomas sat beside her, putting his arm around her shoulders. "Me too. Every single day, I wake up expecting this to be gone. Expecting to have dreamed it all. But it's real. Yeah, it's real." They sat in the darkness, watching their daughter sleep. 2 people who'd found each other in the wreckage and somehow built something beautiful. 3 months after Maya came home, Thomas proposed. Not with fanfare or grand gestures. Just the 2 of them in the nursery, watching their daughter sleep. "Marry me," he said quietly. Shirley looked at him. This man who'd refused to take advantage of her pain. Who'd chosen honesty over convenience. Who'd loved her through complications and crisis. "Why?" "Because I want to build a life with you. Because I want Maya to grow up knowing her parents chose each other deliberately. Because I love you, and I want everyone to know it." "We're already a scandal," Shirley pointed out. "Getting married might make it worse. Or it might make it ours. Our choice. Our family. Our story to tell." Shirley thought about her sister, who'd wanted a family so desperately and never got one. About Thomas's late wife, who'd lost her chance at motherhood. About all the grief that had brought them to this moment. "Okay," she said. "Yes." They got married 3 months later. Small ceremony. Just close friends and Thomas's late wife's family, who'd come to accept Shirley once they saw how much Thomas loved her. Shirley's mother didn't come, but she sent a card. It wasn't much, but it was something. Maya slept through the ceremony in her grandmother Patricia's arms. She'd shown up unannounced, held her granddaughter for the first time, and cried into that tiny head of dark hair. "I'm sorry," she'd whispered to Shirley. "I was so angry at God for taking Maya that I couldn't see He'd given you a gift. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." Shirley had hugged her mother for the first time in months, and they both wept. The wedding made news, of course. More think pieces, more judgment, but also more support than Shirley had expected. People who'd followed their story from the beginning sent messages of congratulations, shared their own stories of unconventional families and unexpected love. The narrative slowly began to shift. Not everywhere, not for everyone, but enough. Enough that Shirley could start to imagine a future where her daughter wouldn't grow up defined by scandal, where their family could just be a family. 6 months after the wedding, Shirley returned to work part-time. A year later, she published a book, a memoir about grief and choice and building family from brokenness. It became a bestseller. Thomas's business recovered, slowly but surely. The investors who'd left were replaced by ones who valued integrity over appearance. Maya grew, hit milestones, smiled and laughed, and became her own person. She had Shirley's eyes and Thomas's stubborn determination. She was loved fiercely by two parents who'd chosen each other in the darkest moment of their lives and built something luminous from it. 2 years after that night at the gala, Shirley stood in the nursery they were converting into a big girl room, watching Thomas paint the walls while Maya helped by getting paint in her hair. "Do you ever regret it?" Thomas asked. "The way we started?" Shirley thought about that night, about being drunk and desperate and asking a stranger for something she didn't fully understand. "No," she said honestly. "I regret the pain, the scandal, the complications, but I don't regret asking. And I don't regret that you said no that night and yes when it mattered. Say it again when you're sober," Thomas quoted softly, remembering. "I did. And you listened." He put down the paintbrush, crossing to her, paint stained and smiling. "Best decision I ever made." Maya squealed, running over to wrap her paint-covered hands around both their legs. They were a mess, all three of them, but they were a family, built from grief and choice and the courage to create hope even when everything hurt. And that was enough. That was everything. So there you have it. A love story that started with 3 impossible words and became something real through honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to choose hope over fear. Shirley and Thomas didn't get a fairy tale, but they got something better, a real, messy, beautiful life built on their own terms. If this story touched you, if it made you feel something, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future stories. Drop a comment below telling me what you think about unconventional love stories and whether happy endings have to look traditional to be real. And smash that like button to support more emotionally complex content like this. Because the best love stories aren't the ones that start perfect. They're the ones where imperfect people choose each other anyway and build something beautiful from the wreckage. Thanks for listening. See you in the next story.